This is Jared with the Daily News. You guys had the conference championships this past weekend to kind of close things out. I know you guys didn't really know what the case was going to be with the season as a whole just a few months ago. Just general overview, I guess. How do you think things went, and what did you like, what didn't you like, and what do you want to see improved upon?
Well, I think it went pretty well. Not as well as we'd have liked it to go. I think so as far as on the women's side, we did deal with some injuries, and that's stuff that comes up with every team. So, I'm used to those things coming up here and there in my career. This is the difference in the past years where I've coached at some of the other places. Just having depth to where when things happen, it's because they're going to happen eventually. Somebody's going to get a little banged up, something. None of these kids are going to be perfect every time out. But having other kids to be able to step up and fill those voids, that's something where we kind of are missing at this time, especially on the women's side, but also the men. But with the women, it actually came up where we had these injuries, and it kind of slowed us down, slowed the momentum down a little bit. On the flip side, the men early on in the season, we were missing some guys in action. And towards the end of the season, the momentum kind of built as we're heading into the championship. So things for the men went a little bit better overall, but definitely on both ends of the team with the men and the women, we're definitely missing some depth there that we're hoping to work out here in the next year or two with recruiting. Is something that I take as a very important part of my job to recruit the best athletes to come here and develop the program. But for both teams to improve one place from previous years, they've done better than in the past few years. It's a definitely step in the right direction, but I know that the roots we've planted in place so far entail that we should definitely be able to do better than what we did. But the future's bright. I see where we're pretty close to getting to the goals that these kids want to establish and want to have in the coming years.
Coach, this is Nick with the College Heights Herald. So one of the storylines was Emerson getting third team all conference honors. So what does that mean to you being his coach? This is your first year, and just what kind of testament does that speak of Emerson?
It's a lot. It speaks a lot for Emerson. This is a guy that, when I first got here in January, he had just got injured, and he actually didn't run any of the indoor season. And, if we would have had an outdoor season, I think he possibly would have been able to come back towards the middle to end of the outdoor season. But I guess COVID kind of worked into his hands a little bit, kind of helped him have a longer time to prepare for cross. But, if I'm being completely open and honest, there's some parts in the summer where, Emerson was it had been a little while since he had competed. So, he's kind of getting a little weary and like getting a little burned out on just, training and trying to get back healthy. So we definitely worked through some things over the summer. But once he got here back on campus, Emerson was just getting it done. He's a guy that just always shows up, no matter the situation or how everybody's doing it in general as a group. He's always that guy you can count on. And I have a few like this, but he comes in and gets it done and leads by example. Not a very vocal guy, which is fine. Not everybody needs to be, but he leads by example for the most part. And as far as on race day, when it's time to compete, he's going to get it done when it matters the most. And I think he showed that. He's the first guy since 2016 to be all conference. But if you look at also the two guys on the team next to him, Dedrick and Clint Sherman, these guys, had Emerson not been in front of them, each one of them would have been in place to be all conference as well. So it just goes to show our top three guys are getting into that elite level that we need to have in order to be a top 5, top 3 conference team. Like I mentioned in the previous question, just the depth, having a couple more guys that could compete at that same level would really showcase a much higher team placement. But for Emerson to get all conference, he's definitely showing that the program is moving in the right direction and we have the right things in place to get kids to that level.
Coach Jared with the Daily News here. When we had you before, right before the season started, you mentioned one of your and then she comes out and is you're basically your best runner all season. What was it like watching her from that point of starting that first day of workouts up until the conference championship?
Yeah, this is someone that didn't have a whole lot of experience in those, even in those workout settings, or it was a big learning experience for her. So being able to see her learn at that rate was pretty exciting. You have kids that compete all through high school that still have to learn some things that she had to learn, but her being able to kind of catch up and at the same time be a leader, being that top runner on the team is hard to consider yourself, the leader of the group or finishing first on the team. But then you're like thinking, well, I'm still learning stuff at the same exact time. So I could see where it could have been a little confusing situation for her to understand. I'm sure she didn't know much of the history of the program, the history of the team, but I think she stepped into the role and handled it very well. Of course, that leads to pressure at points to compete at a certain level or to maintain that level. But I think she didn't really let that come into her mind too much. At times we discussed it, but overall, I think we just tried to focus on executing the things that we can control with her and learning as much as we can. So I would say this was a great start to her career at WKU. And I've told her this was probably the least successful career she's had or semester she's had so far. I only see bigger and greater things happening for her in the sequential semesters and training cycles and seasons that will happen after this. So future is definitely very bright for Rory.
Coach, this is Nick again. You're going to have 3 seniors, not too many, but leave the program. Who are you going to have kind of step up this next season? I know it's quite a ways away, but who do you kind of see taking the reins of stepping up and being your leaders next year?
Again, when it comes to the women, we were definitely led by a lot of freshmen. I mean, 3 out of my top 4 runners for most of the year were freshmen. Rory kind of definitely set the bar high for that, but for that leadership. But someone like Lucy Rutherford, Zoe Manning, these freshmen are going to, as they become sophomores, I think the sky's the limit for their potential, their growth. I kind of expected one of those two to be higher up in my team placement before Rory, to be honest with you. So with these girls, I know that they dealt with some injuries. That's something that you don't see on the score sheet is that, with Lucy and Zoe, the last 3 weeks or so of the season, they probably run once or twice. They were cross training a lot due to some little injuries they had. So that's something you don't see on the results page. But, these kids stay consistent. They'll definitely step up. As far as the men go, they will be 3 of these juniors will be seniors, so I'll have them for another year, at least one more year. We've already talked a little bit about utilizing that COVID season for them to have a 5th year. But even without that being said, we have freshmen here that are going to be able to grow and mature and step into those roles. So it's my part to continue to recruit kids that can continue to move up. And I think for the next year or two, my women's team is definitely going to be driven by freshmen, sophomores, and we will have one senior next year that has been one of my top runners since day one. So it's going to be a while before we come up on a situation where we losing a lot of kids or really going to have to look for a lot of kids to step up. I think the way we're going to play this out is as 1 or 2 people graduate, there's always going to be 1 or 2 people waiting in the wings to step up. And again, recruiting more depth is going to help that. So this next recruiting class for the men and women is going to be a pretty big one, to say the least.
Coach Jared with the Daily News here, kind of jumping back to Rory, that first race that she ran, I know it was kind of a while ago now. Did you say anything to her? Or did you notice anything from her leading up to that race or on race day, kind of just nerves or confidence or anything like that? Because she came top 10 that day, first race.
I think she didn't know what to expect. And I didn't want to put a lot of expectation. I liked the little bit of naiveness that she did have going into it. I like that to say the least, because I think a lot of kids, sometimes they end up learning too much. I think they end up knowing too much. And sometimes it could tend to negate their performance if they're putting these expectations, especially for someone like that who had never raced before. The last thing I wanted to do was to tell her what any type of indication I saw from her training that would put her in a situation to probably shoot too far for something and not achieve it, and then set her up for that kind of failure as the season went on. I wanted to set her up just with no expectations and really just to trust the training and to trust her teammates, because that's one thing she did know. She knew what the girls were doing in practice alongside her. So I just told her, hey, these girls run with you every day. You know that you're able to keep up with them. So when the race goes off, find some of those girls. There's only 3 teams in the race, so it should be a lot easier to find them. And, if you're feeling good, just, make moves later in the race, but at least start out just nice and comfortable with your teammates and get a feel for things before you push forward. And I think she did that. She was kind of like our second or third girl at the first maybe mile of the race, and then she kind of put herself as our first girl after about halfway. So she was able to execute the plan we had, but I definitely didn't tell her what I expected her to do. I didn't expect her top 10, honestly, but I did expect her to be somewhere in that top 15 to 20. I definitely thought she would be at least my number 3, if not number 2 girl. So for her to be number 1 definitely was surprising, but I knew that she was just as good as any other girl I had on my team at the time.
Coach, this is Nick with the Herald again. So I know that you touched on this last time that we ended up talking to you, but it's your first season on the Hill. You showed up back in January. Just walk us through how you feel like your first, season went and what are your hopes just for the next season.
I'll admit that I'm like any coach or most coaches I would think are very hard on themselves. We critique ourselves, and we always feel like there's a stone we didn't turn, or there's something that we could have improved on. So I definitely feel like I did fairly well. I would say maybe like a B minus, but I definitely think there's a lot of room to grow for myself as a coach. There's a lot of mistakes I made, and there's a lot of more effort I can put into recruiting. I think this year. As far as starting back in the summer until now, it's probably the hardest I've ever worked as a recruiter in my entire coaching career. So that was something that maybe in January, I knew that I was coming in kind of late. I had already finished recruiting class with another college. So I knew that it would be hard to recruit kids at that later stage, but I did the best I could. I think it worked out as best as it could have. I really am, especially I did have some luck with Rory. And, as far as Lucy and Zoe, they came in and was, like I said, leading this group of girls. But I think, moving forward, we definitely want to see more. I definitely want to see myself improve more as a coach. The team had the best finishes in years, but I know what I'm seeing out of this group is a teams that can even surpass anything we've done so far. But for me, I definitely feel like we're heading in the right direction. And I'm excited for what's coming up in the future. I'm definitely excited for track season. I hope everything goes well. We have a season, but I could see a lot of these kids that have performed well in cross country having the best track season they could imagine having. So it's definitely exciting. And we're anticipating it, just like we anticipated cross season now. But, we're, as runners and coaches, we take a little break, but then it's like after a week or so, that week or two feels like an eternity, and we're already ready for the next season. So they're going to have a little tough time handling this break, but because they're excited for the track season. But we're excited for that to start soon.